Hey Wreckers, so bad news for today's video. It is of course in portrait mode. As we know, portrait mode is inferior to landscape mode in every way, but to film a larger figure like this, I currently don't have the capability to do that in landscape mode. To do so, I'd have to push him way back and bring my phone way back, and it just lowers the quality of the video insanely. So I do apologize for that. I'm going to try and hopefully get something that will allow me to film in landscape mode in high quality with larger figures like this in the near future. But regardless, without further ado, today's video is going to be somewhat of a figure showcase, somewhat of a character retrospective for Autobot Megatron. So, to start off, of course, this is Combiner Wars Megatron, Combiner Wars Leader Megatron. He does have the DX9 upgrade kit on him, which includes these leg covers here, these feet with built-in rocker joints, so he gets some ankle action. This barrel cover here, which completes the fusion cannon. It makes it look more proportionate, as well as this shoulder cannon in the back. The other thing I've done to this figure is got some Toyhax labels. I apologize for the sheen. These are chrome for whatever reason. Toyhax labels, and I did him up as an Autobot. Now, I think this is a great figure. I was somewhat afraid of the end result that I was going to get, just because when I got him, he was bigger than I expected. On top of, at the beginning, when I was originally looking into doing up a Megatron like Autobot Megatron, I was looking at the battle box, or the Netflix box, I should say, Megatron for the Siege toy line. Well, it wouldn't be the Siege toy line, it's the Netflix toy line that's attached to War for Cybertron. I don't know why they decided to do that, but they did. But the point being is I was dead set on getting that Megatron, but he's expensive. The Toyhax labels just weren't in stock, so I ended up going with this guy. Now, to show you guys a little bit about it, so the feet sort of just peg on there. If I can get them off, they are a very tight, there you go. The feet are a tight connection. They, of course, have that built-in rocker joint there in there. The leg panels sort of just come on, pop on there. If this thing is going to, you know, cooperate with me, which it doesn't seem like it wants to, come on. Come on, there. There we go. So that's one of the leg panels. Of course, this is just a barrel for the fusion cannon. It's really nothing special. It just more or less makes the fusion cannon look more proportionate all the way down, instead of just coming to that little point there. And then lastly, we have the shoulder cannon here. Now, it's meant to tab in right there in that screw hole, but it makes it set up so high that it's just, no thank you. It just doesn't look good, and of course it moves when you move the arm, and it's not a good look in my opinion. Let me put this stuff back on real quick, and we'll get into the labels for this guy. Now, I will put a link in the description down below for the link to the Toyhax labels for this guy. I'm not going to guarantee they're in stock, but Toyhax is pretty good about restocking fairly quickly. But yeah, so that is the upgrade kit. Now, with the labels, of course, you can see here the G1-ish curly chest hair, of course, the Auto brand. Of course, and these little red and black spots all over him. Those are labels. Of course, you got some on the shoulder up here, as well as these very 80s-ish wire relays, or wire inlays, excuse me, on his arms. So, that is my Autobot Megatron. Not exactly the closest to IDW Megatron, the one we're talking about today, but I feel like he is a great analog for that character. Now, without further ado, let's get into the actual character and why I did this. So, in the 2005 IDW comics, Megatron becomes an Autobot. Crazy to think about, right? So what happens is that through a series of very contrived events, and they were somehow done in a way that made them feel not contrived, but it was... The entire plan was ridiculous on Shockwave's part, but that's a whole nother video. But the TLDR version of it is that Megatron had like a mini character evolution, right? He nearly died in All Hail Megatron and was put into stasis. And he came back out of stasis with a new body. And he saw that Starscream had pretty much run the Decepticons into the ground. And he went from being a tyrant to being more of the... I want to say he's more of the Hannibal Lecter type at that point, because he'll sit... I get the feeling that he'll sit down and explain why he's doing what he's doing to you, why he's going to kill you, and then kill you instead of just outright killing you. Which isn't much, but for somebody who's just a cold-blooded murderer, that is quite the character progression, in my opinion. So, he comes back with his new body, gets captured by Optimus, has a whole thing with Optimus. They get back to Cybertron, and to my best recollection of the events, pretty much Megatron in his new body goes and fights Evil Incarnate. That's the best way I know how to explain it. And he holds it off pretty well, if not outright defeating. I think Optimus ends up using the Matrix to destroy it, but Megatron held his own pretty well. But after that, Megatron sort of disappears. Bumblebee is there trying to lead Cybertron into the future. He's not doing too good because, you know, a bunch of bad stuff is happening. And then one day Megatron sort of just walks in. He's sort of just like a metal endoskeleton at that point. He's just, you know, I can't say skin and bones, and he doesn't have bones, but he's just metal struts at that point. But he strolls on in. He gets a new body, and he starts up his old thing again. And throughout all of this, he somehow comes to respect Bumblebee. He comes to actually, I don't know, I wouldn't go as far to say as a friend, but it has been a while. But I'll stick with he comes to respect Bumblebee and what he's trying to do. So then it comes to light that Shockwave has this big plan that's pretty much culminating in him destroying a universe. I know, crazy. There's so much more to that plan, but I would be here all day if I went into the exact details of that plan. So I'll just say he was trying to destroy a universe. And Optimus, Bumblebee, and Megatron were like, that's a little far, don't you think? So they went to confront him. So they get there, and Shockwave has this, like... He has this, like, weapon attached to him, pretty much. Again, if I remember correctly, it has been a while. And he pretty much shoots and vaporizes Bumblebee, just kills him outright. And Megatron's like, oh my god. This dude who is just trying to be the best he can be for our people, be the best he can be, for our people, just got killed. He just got mollywopped. And then the gears start turning in Megatron's head, and he starts thinking and thinking and thinking. And he's finally like, oh my god. He has that realization. What have I become? So he picks up Bumblebee's smoking auto brand off the ground, attaches it to himself, and is like, I am now an Autobot. So then he him and Optimus, beat Shockwave by reawakening Shockwave's dormant emotions, because Shockwave was a victim of shadow play and had his emotions taken from him, and a bunch of other stuff. But they beat him. So then, what happens is that Megatron is to be put before a court, and he goes before the court and he invokes a law that everybody forgot. And he pretty much goes on an adventure with this guy right here to find the ancient knights of Cybertron, because according to this law, they're the only ones that can truly judge him. So they go on this whole adventure, and pretty much throughout this adventure, Megatron becomes a pacifist. He becomes a pacifist. He refuses to fight until, well, before we get to that, he has a very great interaction with Ravage. We also find out some other things about Megatron, like he's afraid of nemosurgery, with people going into his brain and messing with his memories. He has like a phobia of that, but he has a very great conversation with Ravage. I don't have the quotes pulled up. I probably should have, but I don't. But one quote from that conversation that sticks out in my mind that Megatron said, well, two actually, when he was talking to Optimus prior to fighting Evil Incarnate, they were both aboard Omega Supreme. He was held captive, and he was talking to Optimus, and he told Optimus that the reason he does what he does is because he wants to. And Megatron, while talking to Ravage, says, I said that. I was thinking it in my head, and I was going to say it just to get under his skin, get under Optimus's skin. But once I said it, I realized it was true. I'm doing these things because I like to. And he made Megatron think. And then Megatron said, if the world sees you as a monster, who cares? That's the world. It's their opinion. Their opinion doesn't matter. But when you start to see yourself as a monster, that's when it really hits home. And then, after that interaction, they're currently, after many misadventures, they're on the world of what's called the Necrobot, pretty much the Transformer Grim Reaper. They're on the world of the Necrobot, the Decepticon Justice Division, a group of very bad dudes, to say the least. I know I've mentioned them before. I think I mentioned them in my 0.1%er video. I should probably do a video on them at some point, because they are pretty cool, but they're just a group of bad dudes, to say the least. Now, they show up with a whole army. I think they allied with Deathsaurus at this point, maybe Overlord too, or I can't quite remember if they allied with Overlord or he just showed up, but pretty much they show up, and Megatron has to forsake his pacifism, and he goes out there and he just slaughters the Decepticon Justice Division. It is just a slaughter. He kills each of them, and his last words to the leader, Tarn, is, and I really wish I had the exact quote, but to sum it up, it's, die knowing that everything you did was for nothing. And then he kills Tarn, or Glitch, Damus, whatever you want to call him. So then, at this point, also, Ravage has been pretty much killed, and Megatron goes to Ravage's side, and Ravage looks at him. At this point, Megatron had taken Tarn's faceplate, which was into the shape of the Decepticon brand, and he had placed it on his chest. And Ravage scratches the plate and says, "Don't go back." And then, of course, Megatron... Now, in this continuity, originally Megatron was a poet, or a miner and a poet, I should say. He was writing poetry and stuff about, equality, because as a miner, he was part of an underprivileged class on Cybertron, and he wanted to fight for equality. And after some shenanigans, that's, getting beat up by a police officer, among other things, that's how he becomes a Decepticon. So, after the stuff that happened on the Necrobot world, some more misadventures happen, and they find themselves in a parallel universe on Cybertron. Him, Hot Rod or Rodimus, and the rest of the crew of the starship that they're on find themselves in a parallel universe. Well, stuff happens there, and Megatron ends up staying in that universe. And I believe Ultra Magnus is like, he's just trying to avoid his sentencing. But the reason Megatron stayed in that universe, and mind you, in this universe, it was run by Functionists. Now, Functionists are people who think that your alt mode should determine what you do. It's pretty much like the caste system. Like, you got the peasants, you got the merchants and peddlers, the warriors, so on and so forth. That was the Functionist Cybertron. And Megatron stays in that world to preach what he was originally preaching all the way in the days back before the start of the Decepticon movement. He's preaching peace through pacifism, or peace through non-action, and all that stuff. So more things happen, because of course they do. And the Functionists come to the main universe, along with Megatron manning a fleet of starships. Well, I shouldn't say it like that, because it makes it sound like the Megatron was allied with the Functionists. No, the Functionists came to the main universe, and Hot Rod and the crew of the starship they were on, I should mention his name, it's called Lost Light. Hot Rod and the crew of the Lost Light start battling against the Functionists. And they're there like, what are we going to do? And then Megatron comes through the portal with a fleet of starships to help Hot Rod. At this point, Megatron has aged. It's been a while, if I remember correctly. So Megatron helps him, and you have this great scene. The thing with where you have this great scene where Megatron tries to open the Matrix of Leadership, and I don't think he can. Now, I feel like that was a very great character moment, because in that moment, I believe it was more so the fact that you have to think you're worthy. I guess the Matrix in the context of the story is very much like Mjolnir from the Marvel comics, where you have to believe you're worthy to actually wield Mjolnir. So he tries to open it, he can't, and then Hot Rod ends up opening it. So they defeat the Functionists, and then two things happen after that. And by this point, they found out that the Knights of Cybertron aren't real. They're not. So, two things happen. In one instance, Megatron goes back to Cybertron, and he gets put on trial and convicted. And that's that. But he does thank Rodimus for, the years that they spent together and the adventure and whatnot. And in another scenario, which they both technically happen in the same universe, but not. So earlier in the story, something happened with the Lost Light. It has quantum engines, so they can quantum jump across the universe. Well, there was a malfunction, and it caused it to duplicate. So at the same time, in the universe, there were two of each person and two Lost Lights. So there was. I don't think Megatron was aboard at this point, but as an example, there were two Hot Rods at one point. There were two Ratchets at one point, and so on and so forth. And pretty much what they do is they overload the engines on a gamble that what's going to happen is it's going to create a duplicate copy of the Lost Light and everybody on board so they can continue their adventures. And what do you know, it works. So there's a Megatron currently imprisoned on Cybertron for eternity. I believe that was a sentence. It wasn't death. It was eternal imprisonment. And then there's a Megatron out there with Hot Rod, Ultra Magnus, and a bunch of the other crew members of the Lost Lights just out there exploring the universe, because I believe they also jumped themselves into another alternate universe. So they're just out there doing whatever. So that was probably a very long and rambly explanation of Megatron. Now, why do I like that story? Why do I like that characterization so much? I like it for the express fact that it feels like a whole character arc. Like, it feels like it brought the story of Megatron to completion. Now, granted, you have continuities like the original G1 continuity where, you know, Optimus fights Megatron, Megatron dies, gets brought back by Unicron as Galvatron, and they keep going, and then Galvatron gets defeated and gets revived into Super Megatron in a very obscure comic, you know. But he never really diverts from the course of being Megatron, right? Even if he's named Galvatron, he's still Megatron, if you get my meaning. Then you get, you know, car robots where it's not technically Megatron, it's Gigatron, but they had to save the trademark by using the name, and he's just an evil dude. The closest thing we get to this is, I believe, in the first time we get close to this is in the Unicron trilogy in Armada. Now, in Energon and Cybertron, Megatron is sort of just an evil guy again. But in Armada, it seems like he's just more of a warrior than anything, because if I'm remembering right, Megatron, after Optimus Prime's first death, is sort of just there, like, depressed because he has nothing to do now. That's the best way I can put it. So, he doesn't seem to be an out-and-out tyrant in that, but he seems just to be more thoughtful, I guess is the word of it. I guess is the word for it. Then, of course, we get Transformers Animated, where, you know, Megatron's just an evil dude again. Then we get to Transformers Prime. Now, in Prime, it features the archetypal, you know, standard tyrant Megatron. But then you get to the end of Prime, and you get Megatron, he gets subjugated by Unicron, is basically mind-controlled by him, his body is taken over, and by the end of it, when they free him from Unicron's control, Megatron is like, I'm dissolving Decepticons. I know what it's like to be subjugated, like truly subjugated now, and I did not like it at all, so Decepticons are no more. Which leads, of course, into the Robots in Disguise show, and Megatron's not featured in it at all, I don't believe. Of course, then you have Power of the Primes and Combiner Wars, those great shows, am I right, guys? Those amazing shows. I jest, but you get, for those of you who don't know, Megatron in those two shows, he is the funniest guy in the world. He goes from being Tyrant Megatron, he basically turns into Obi-Wan Kenobi. Like, he is just the biggest troll in the world. He is a troll to no end, which is amazing. But I would say he's kind of close. I mean, he's not an Autobot, but he isn't a bad guy from my recollection anymore. So then, you know, and I don't really think we've gone anywhere since then. Now, of course, Babe movies, out and out bad guy. The only time I feel like they've actually gone full Autobot with Megatron is in the 2005 IDW comics. And like I said, the reason I like this so much is because they brought it full circle. You know, Megatron started off as that poet miner looking for equality. Bad things happened to him, so he started the Decepticons. Then after he started the Decepticons, he sort of started falling into it more and more. And before I go further in that, we do have the War for Cybertron show, in which Megatron, you know, it showcases that descent into being more bad. Because at the beginning, you have Megatron very hesitant to do big things, like unleashing that virus on Cybertron. He has to think about it for a while. You have him shutting down that one Decepticon run facility to fuel the Nemesis. and he has to actually go visit it and think about it. So you also have a thoughtful Megatron there, but that's more him just sliding into the tyrantism. I don't think that's a word, but I'm going with it, tyrantism. But going back to what I was saying, so he starts the Decepticons, and he starts the slow descent into becoming a tyrant. And he goes and goes and goes and goes until his defeat in New York. And he comes back, sees the Decepticons in shambles, sort of has this turn where he's more willing to talk than before. Like I said earlier, he'll tell you why he's murdering you before he murders you. Again, may not seem like much, but it is something. Then you have the stuff with Bumblebee and Shockwave, where he really realizes, what he's done. And then he gets a second chance at life, going to the alternate universe, the Functionist universe, as it's called. And he preaches what he was originally saying all the way back in the days when he was a miner and a poet. So it really brings Megatron full circle for me. You see the totality of his character evolution. You see his rise and you see his fall. You see his redemption. And I really, really enjoy that. And I wish more people knew about it. Because if I'm being honest, I would say his character arc, his redemption story, the totality of his character in the IDW 2005 comics is the penultimate example of how a character's story should be written. It is amazing, and I love it. And some of you guys are probably thinking, man, he is really jerking off that story. And I am, because I think it's amazing. I think it's great, and I think more people need to experience it. But with that being said, guys, I believe I've gone over everything in a very rambly way, of course. But that has been my thoughts on Autobot Megatron. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I will say that I do need your guys' help on something. I'm trying to find the thing that I say to explain that. Every YouTuber sort of has the thing they say at the end of the video. Rodimus Primal has "Till All Are One." Chris McFeely sort of takes the subject matter of his video and turns it into a little quip for the end of each video. So like with Shockwave's video, I believe he said something along the lines of, if Shockwave's bound to appear in, future series, it's, after all, it's only logical. And, Shockwave's thing being logic. So I need to find that thing. And, I started off with Hey Wreckers, and I'm thinking about going with that and ending with, Wreck and Rule. But it's such a generic thing. If somebody's out there saying it, I really don't want to step on toes. But it's what I'm going with currently. But if y'all have any suggestions for something I could say in the future, what to call y'all guys, what to end the videos with, among other things, please leave your thoughts down below. As always, leave your criticisms of what I could have done better in this video. Of course, I can't get better without you guys. You guys are my backbone. I need y'all to give me the criticism so I can get better at this. But on top of all that, I hope y'all enjoyed the video. Again, leave your thoughts down below. And I'll see y'all later. Wreck and Rule.